Good evening everybody, this is a follow-up video to my earlier dismemberment of the standard cans on the Interceptor, and if you've watched the video or my previous videos you'll know that I said I would slice everything in half, and I have now done so. This is part 2, this is the headers. So there's my original headers and cans languishing on the garage floor last week. I took them off and then waited for the Stratus headers and the AEW cans, both in brushed stainless steel, to arrive. They're now on the bike and I'll post my thoughts on that later if anybody's interested. You'll recall, if you've watched my previous videos, that I found a big hefty weld at the can end of the header, and somebody did say to me, well, it's a low horsepower bike and it's in a low state of tune and it doesn't make any difference. Well, so why bother doing it, replacing the headers? Well, my thoughts are quite the reverse, that if it's a low horsepower, low tuned engine, humongous great welds like that in the pipe are not exactly going to improve things. You might get away with that on a 1000cc bike and have plenty of power left over. So that same logic to me says get rid of unnecessary obstructions in the header and the cans, lighten the bike up. So there's the weld. This is where the skin, the outer skin, joins the inner tube, and there's a big metal ring welded on the outside, and that is the same weld on the inside. As you can see from the previous video, it protrudes a lot into the bottom of the header pipe. This next shot shows the standard header next to the Stratus header, and a few other shots later will show the difference between the two. I'm sure most people are aware of just, you know, how different they are, but here is the shot of the headers. As you can see, the standard header is chunkier because it's double skinned. There's a big weld on the right hand side near the finned collar, so that's a separate bit that's welded on afterwards, pre-chroming. And the finned collar on any bike I've ever known with ferrous type, you know, finned collars like that, they always rust and you can't keep them clean. They start to degrade and look awful, and just not as if you can get a chrome cleaner in there, and even then it always comes off. So there is a close-up shot of the weld. That's a separate piece that's been put onto the bent pipe and on the front of the header. Even the weld is beginning to rust, as you can see, because it's the hottest bit of the engine there, and it looks blooming awful. So hence my wanting to replace them, as lots of other people have done, from a performance point of view, but also just purely cosmetically. That I don't think anybody actively wants that on their bike, do they, really? Unless you don't care about it, but we do, don't we? So here's the standard. Can you spot which one's the standard header there? Yes, you've won a prize. It's the right hand side one. Look at it. Awful, isn't it? Whereas the Stratus one is a nice precision made piece of kit. As I said in previous video, I put longer header studs on because I put ones on the cylinder head that were just a little bit too short for the Stratus one. So that's all done and my system is now on. I'm going to post a video later with my thoughts about it, and would welcome any comments. This next shot shows the slicing in half. So as you can see, you've got twin walls there with a gap, an air gap in between. It's not insulated or anything. It's purely cosmetic. It's to stop the pipes going blue. I think the Japanese introduced it in about the 1970s. The old British bikes always had blued pipes, and rusting blued pipes usually, because they weren't stainless steel. So it's an air gap between the two. And again, this next shot shows the top of the header with the finned collar, and like I say, it's a piece that's welded on, and you can see in this photo, look at the size of that weld on the inside. That is right next to the exhaust port, and it's big, isn't it? it's been pushed in. The inner pipe appears to have been flared. That bulge, it's either a weld or it's flared in some way. It's welded on the outside as well, and that cannot improve performance, in my humble opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, if anybody's going to correct or put their views, I've had to delete a few comments recently, not too many, where people are blaspheming and using the F word. Now, I'm not Mother Teresa, but I don't like to have that sort of stuff, and there's no need for it. So there is the cat that's in the header. It's tiny compared to the one that's in the cans, and as you can see on the left hand side of it, there is another big weld. So that's when you look at it from the outside of the bike, you see that chromed weld area. It's got a little baby cat. You might call it a kitten. The cat lives in the can and the kitten lives in the header. But it's got another blooming great weld on one side of it. On the other side, there's also a weld. It's not as big as the one at the front, but look at it. It's ragged, and it's not going to improve things. And like I say, a low-tuned, low brake horsepower bike needs less of that. So there's the little kitten. You can see the weld goes all the way through to the outer skin, because that's where you can see the two rings under the bike. And this next photo just coming up shows the weld at the other side of the cat. So far there's the one at the bottom of the header, there's one either side of the cat, and there's one at the top. So add that lot up in terms of restriction and just interfering with gas flow and so on, and it can't improve things. It must be better to get rid. Here's another shot of the same. That's the other side. Now the weld on that isn't quite as big. It's still there though, and it's probably about 1-2 mil. The other one's at least 3 mil. This next shot shows a section of the pipe sliced in half. I can't actually get all of the entire header in one shot because of the curves in it, and using an iPad to make these videos. I'm not a YouTuber with all this fancy gear, as you can probably tell. So there it is. There's the inner and outer pipe. Now I found on one of my inners it had a crack in it. I've not photographed it and put it here because I'm not sure if that was me, wrenching it and pulling it and so on that made it crack. But there is a crack on the inner pipe. So it could be heat, or it could be just a defect. This next shot shows half of the kitten. Here it is, coming up. So you can see there, you can see both welds, right and left, and weld on the inner pipe, the outer pipe, double skinned. It's a big price to pay for cosmetics, I think. I'd rather see a straw coloured or blue header at the top than have cart all that weight about and all that restriction about just for cosmetics. I like the look of a stainless exhaust. I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. So there's the top of it. That's the finned collar end. I've got another shot coming after this. So you can see it is definitely a weld, isn't it? There's a slight flaring of the pipe to slot in the finned collar section. But then there is that is definitely a weld. And if you look at across the cross section of it, I think you're probably looking at 3 mil again. So at least the welds that are cluttering up the pipe are consistent in thickness. Is that a blessing? I don't think so. Here's another shot of the top there. Plus you can see all the crustiness on the fins. You obviously don't need the fins for heat dissipation. I think it's just a thing, isn't it? They've been on bikes for years. British bikes set the trend. I think the Japanese put them on the early bikes and then dispense with them, really. This next shot shows the headers, the Stratus versus the standard pipe. So now you know what's inside it, I know what's inside it, and like the cans, that will shortly be going to the recycling centre. I'd welcome your thoughts on it, as I say, but if people are going to put their thoughts, it'd be nice if people express them in a courteous way, for the sake of not me, I'm not some little shrinking violet, but just nobody wants to read what the F are you doing that for, or that kind of thing. It's not uplifting, is it? So yeah, let's keep it polite. So there you have it, autopsies, 2 of on the same day, and I hope people find that interesting. Well, I do, I find it interesting, and I hope you do too. And here's a final shot of my bike with the full system on, and like I say, I'll do a little video later on just giving my thoughts on the actual running of it and my thoughts. But in my opinion, cosmetically, doesn't that look a lot nicer? So if you're out on your bike, watch it, and I hope you're enjoying a decent ride in this lovely weather, as I will be doing shortly. I'll be going out on my bike again. In the meantime, take care, and I'll speak to you again soon.